people object on some cases and some don't. I think it's clear that clearly the residents around there don't have an issue there, and I think that's something which is important to bear in mind. And I'm not sure if there has been a motion to approve, but if there was one, then I would support. I think it's Councillor Nadeem may have moved it, but I think, Chair, sometimes you have to look at it on balance and taking a step back. And in my view, for reasons I voted in favour for the Sefton Street one, I in principle have an objection with this.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks, Chair. I was reviewing the drawings for this proposal earlier on today, and on the face of it, I thought it didn't look too bad, to be honest. It looks like they're almost replacing what's perhaps being demolished. Is something being demolished and then just rebuilt? Because I'd be inclined to support Councillor Whip's motion now, but if this was to come back with a design that was appropriate, I'd be happy to support it then. Is what I'm getting around to saying. I'm just looking at the proposed and existing plans, and I'm trying to get my head around what they can do in order to make it acceptable. And I suppose that's a question for Neil. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Neil, so, I mean, reading it says though it's not being demolished, it's just an add-on. Is that right?
Chairman, there is a smaller building there, but it is lower. So effectively, this is increasing the height of it. That's what the total issue is. Chairman, to answer Councillor Nixon's, I think I've partly gone over that before. I can't see what we can do to reduce the impact in that particular location, other than just indicate build what you can, which is smaller under permitted development rights. I don't think there is a design I could come up with to say that would satisfy the guidance that we have adopted.
Okay, and then Councillor Zafar Ali.
Thank you, Chairman. Question for Neil. If I'm not mistaken, there are other developments on both stretches of this particular locality which go right to the boundary wall. Am I right in my understanding of that, Neil?
There no doubt will be, Chairman, yes.
Thank you, Neil.
Thanks. Can I just ask a quick question, Neil? In terms of the larger homes provision that the government allow, if an application was put in based on the larger homes, where would why would an extension of this side stand?
Chairman, it can't be because it was within the normal permitted tolerances, if that makes sense. So larger home is only when it goes beyond what you would have as a normal permitted right. So it couldn't come in as a larger home extension. Okay,
thanks. Sarah, you've got a hand up. I take it that's a legacy hand. Same with yourself, Zafar. I take yours as a legacy one. Then I've got Ashad, and then I'm going to move to the vote. Ashad?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a question to Neil. What will be the acceptable height in this kind of planning application? Obviously, this is 4.4. What will be acceptable?
Chairman, there's nothing that says a 1 metre or a 10 metre extension will be acceptable. It is really how it relates to the existing property surrounding. So in this situation, because there's already, if you will, a building within the 45 degrees, it just exacerbates that. So I'm not being evasive. I just can't give you a figure here. I would just say that because it projects beyond what is already a breach, if you will, of the 45 degree guidance, anything here would be unacceptable in terms of that policy.
Okay, I think we've had quite a lengthy debate, so I'm going to move to the vote. So it's a straight vote. If you're in favour, you say for. If you're against, once I call your name out. Councillor Nadeem Ahmed.
For.
Councillor David Clegg.
Against.
Councillor Sarah Coburn-Price.
Against.
Councillor Tommy Cooner.
For.
Councillor Mike Goldthorpe.
Against.
Councillor Mohammed Iqbal, 4. Councillor Yasser Iqbal.
4.
Councillor Ashjad Mahmood.
4.
Councillor Brian Newman.
Against.
Councillor Jonathan Nixon.
Against.
Councillor David Whip.
Against.
Councillor Zafar Ali.
4.
Thank you. And Councillor Neil McGowan.
Against.
Okay, so Jane, I make that 6 in favour and 7 against.
Yes, I would agree, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So that application is refused, ladies and gentlemen. The next application is the erection of a 3-storey building to accommodate 3 flats at 27 Railway Street. I have a speaker on this, Mr. Shabir Sadiq. Mr. Sadiq, you've got up to 5 minutes in which to address the committee. So if you want to unmute yourself, once you finish speaking, unless a member of the committee has a direct question to you, I can't permit you to speak again. So the floor is yours for up to 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
I can.
Dear committee, my name is Shabir Sadiq and I am speaking on behalf of the applicant, who is my brother. I'd like to give a brief outline of the recent events over the last year. The property was purchased last year in a dilapidated state, having stood empty for many years and open to the elements for a considerable length of time. The property was bought with a view to carry out a small-scale conversion, a development to convert the existing building into 2 self-contained flats. The existing building was an end property on a block of terraced properties with a traditional shop front and accommodation above. The adjacent property has been converted into a full dwelling. In March 2020, the first application was submitted to convert the building into 2 self-contained flats. At the time, a builder was appointed to carry out the repairs and stabilising works. Roof work had begun and the timber structure was actually repaired. Work also started on the front wall. We were advised by the builder that the wall had no integrity and should be dismantled and rebuilt. As he took down the wall, the side gable wall also became unsafe, as it was now only tied back with the floor joists. The builder, on his own accord, decided to take down the gable wall. At this point, the integrity of the remaining structure became unsafe, and it was decided by the builder to take the whole structure down. He subsequently sold all the stone and left the job, didn't complete the job. At this point, some land at the rear of the property became available. The initial application was withdrawn so that new plans could be drawn up to include land to the rear. During the development of the designs, it was evident that space was now available to comfortably fit 3 self-contained 1-bedroom units within the building. The proposed building has the exact same scale and height, eaves and ridges, as a neighbouring property on the block. A new application was submitted for 3 self-contained flats. The flats have been designed according to the London Housing Design Guide, which is used as a benchmark for all spatial arrangements of flats and dwellings. This is the application that is presented before you. The application has gone through the process and, according to the local policy and planning officer, is able to support the application with a recommendation for approval. Highways were also able to support the application due to the excellent transport links adjacent to the site. As put forward by the planning officer in the Brighfield Area Committee, the previous use of the building was a shop with a flat above. In effect, it would be a negligible increase of 1 flat in the roof space when is seen as a very minor development, and is unlikely to have a detrimental impact on parking or highway safety. I would like to put forward that we are very keen to carry out the development immediately and would prefer not to go to appeal, so we can start construction as soon as possible. Finally, with the time already lost in mind, we would be pleased if councillors would follow the recommendations put forward by the planning department and support us to carry out the development forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sadiq. Neil, is there anything that you need to add?
Yes, Jim. Just one point that's not in the report. Under the provisions of the General Permitted Development Order, I know it's gone now, but a shop can actually have two flats created above it. So were it to have been still in situ, obviously it isn't, then you could have had a shop and two flats above it. The report doesn't say that. So, Chairman, in terms of your material considerations, that would really be the position you would have been in were the buildings have been there in terms of traffic generation. And I would agree with Mr. Sadiq that the traffic generation over and above what was there before for this proposal is at best marginal, Chairman.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Yasser, we've got you first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a question before I comment on this, Chair, for Neil. I think it was in our area committee that was suggested that this was it comes in the town centre vicinity. Is that right? And if so, does that make a difference to the application? Do we look any differently if it was?
Through you, Chairman. Yes, if you are in close proximity to town centres, etc., you don't expect the level of parking, etc., because there are different transport links available to you. So you would expect in town centre locations not to have generally the high level of high a level of parking standards as you may do in say more isolated locations.
But does this fall under that town centre vicinity?
I don't think it's actually in the town centre, Chairman, but it is close to.
No, okay, fine, thank you. I just wasn't sure because I would agree. I think it does fall just outside of the town centre. But Chairman, just in relation to this, obviously this came to our area committee, and the main reason that we had concerns with this was because of the parking. Now, I think Neil showed a copy of the plan and the images of Google Maps of the location. Now, it's a block which is mainly commercial, and you've heard and may have read from the report that this site initially was commercial before it was demolished. And you may have seen from the report as well that there's no provision for off-road parking. And the other thing which may not be clear from the image that we can see on the screen is that directly next to it is a taxi office, which I think has itself a number of cars. I'm not sure how many, but it'll be at least 5 or 6 cars. And anybody familiar with that area, and this is why we had such a big concern, we have a massive issue around that area with speeding cars, and parking is important because I think it creates a more of a risk for residents and for motorists for cars to be parked outside. And that has been an issue which we've been trying to deal with for a number of years with LCC. And I'm surprised, if I'm honest, that in that report, highways don't actually have an issue with it. But I think parking is a serious concern that we have because of the location of it, firstly. And it's only going to get worse with the development of Bradfield Mills. And secondly, there's very little, if not, there's no off-road parking provision. So we felt that there was inadequate parking provisions, and that's the reason we refused. And that's the reason, again, I would move that we refuse on that basis again at this meeting.
Okay, is there a seconder for Councillor Yasser Iqbal? At this stage, I mean, I agree with what Yasser is saying in terms of the highways issue. I mean, it's my county division that leads down there, and on a regular basis, 3 or 4 times a week, I'm getting representations from residents that how narrow that street becomes when there's double parking. And I think that the points raised by Yasser are quite valid in terms of that this potentially could exacerbate the problem that's there with no off-street car parking. So, for the purposes of the debate, I'm going to second Councillor Yasser Iqbal. I've got Councillor Nadeem Ahmed next.
Yeah, Chairman, through you, can I just ask Neil a couple of questions relating to the one public response? There was only one, and one of the comments is summarised as being, it mentions, it says, the proposed roof tiles are not in keeping with the attached building. That's the first point. And the second one is, the external finish of the building will not be in keeping. In terms of them two things, Neil, is that a cause for concern, or what's your views on them two particular items?
Unfortunately, my internet's going in and out, but any external materials you can control by condition if you're not happy with them. So you can say that you're not happy with X and Y, and you can require materials to match, or you can require samples to be put in. So my view, sorry if I did catch Councillor Orman correctly, is that you can deal with it by condition.
Yeah, thank you, Neil.
I think it helps you, Nadeem. Part of the conditions is around talking around material, so number 3 picks that up.
Yeah, I'm quite comfortable with that, Neil. Thank you. So I think if that is conditioning, I'm quite satisfied with that. But in terms of the site itself, the applicant has stated it was a derelict building, and the site would otherwise just be left there and attract bad things for the area, I believe, in terms of fly timming, etc. So I think I congratulate the applicant for coming forward and putting a proposal forward for development on the site. I think the main concern around this is to do with the highways issues, whether that's a problem or not. And I take on board what both Councillor Iqbal, Yasser and Mohammed Iqbal have said in terms of the highways issues and the potential concerns. But in terms of the specific comment about the taxi base, I mean, if the taxi base is next door on that particular block or close to it, they will have their own specific parking, which will be within their planning rules. So they will have to have their own parking for that. But this is a sustainable location in terms of public transport, and it is close to Brighfield Centre itself in terms of the amenities. So unfortunately, I'm not going to support the proposal that's put forward in terms of refusing this, because I don't feel the grounds are strong enough in terms of the highways reasons that have been put forward. So I'm going to move that we approve this application.
Okay. Is there a seconder for Nadeem? Somebody talk to me.
I'll second Nadeem.
Okay, Jonathan, thank you. Next, I've got David Whip.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I ask, in the report, it says that in the relevant planning history, it says that the in 2007, it was approved for use as a base for taxis with 8 vehicles. Are we talking about this property, or given the reference to the taxi base next door, are we talking about that was for a different property? I don't know whether Mr. Watson's got an answer on that.
Chairman, it dropped out, so I don't know what the taxi base is 2 doors away. But sorry, my internet is playing.
Just in terms of the planning history, Neil, what David is asking, that on the planning history it talks about use as a base for taxis. Is that referring to this particular building or something else?
It's this building, yes.
Okay.
Chairman, sorry, my understanding is it's 2 doors away, but I might be wrong.
Chairman, it may have been a single unit at that point in single ownership, but the planning history doesn't refer to other properties. It does refer to this property.
Okay, thank you. I mean, my judgment is that we won't have a leg to stand on if it goes to appeal. So I think I'm minded to vote to approve it.
Okay, thanks, David. Next, I've got Brian Newman. Brian?
Thank you, Chair. I just got one concern. It says in the application that the public footpath will be closed. Now, will that mean that people will have to go into the road to go around the development, or will there be another footpath accessible to the public? Because it isn't a good place to be walking on the road down there. Thank you, Chair.
Chairman, I haven't got a design for the footpath, but they would have to have an order approved by the county council to shut that, and the county would ensure that there was a way through that or around that was safe. So I can't give you a design of that, but Chairman, that will be undertaken by the county when they approve the footpath licence.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Neil. And then finally, I've got Councillor Zafar Ali on this one.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick request. Could Neil just put back up the drawing that you had? I missed it earlier on. Thank you, Neil.
So do you want to add anything?
No, that's fine, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, I've got again a straightforward on this. If you're in favour, for. If you're against. Councillor Nadeem Ahmed.
For.
Councillor David Clegg.
For.
Councillor Sarah Coburn-Price. Councillor Sarah Coburn-Price. Councillor Sarah Coburn-Price. Oh, she's dropped out. Councillor Tommy Cooney.
For.
Councillor Mike Goldthorpe.
For.
Councillor Mohammed Iqbal. Against. Councillor Yasser Iqbal.
Against.
Councillor Ashad Mahmood.
Abstain.
Yeah, this is the reason why I just keep myself to myself.
Abstain, sorry. Councillor Brian Newman. Brian, you're on mute.
For, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Jonathan Nixon.
For.
Councillor David Whip.
For.
Councillor Zafar Ali.
Abstain, Chairman.
Councillor Neil McGowan.
For.
Thank you. And final call for boarding for Councillor Sarah Coburn-Price. I think she's dropped out. Okay, Jane, so I make that 8 in favour, 2 against and 2 abstentions.
Yes, that's right, Chairman.
Okay, that's fine. So that planning application is approved. Mr. Sadiq, you're more than welcome to stop for the rest of the meeting, but I'm sure you may want to go and enjoy the rest of the evening elsewhere. Thank you very much for your attendance. Okay, item 5 is the general fund revenue budget. Mr. Langton.
Thank you, Chairman. So the report is in 3 parts. So the first part gives you some information on the national funding position, starting with the spending review that happened in November, but then goes on to provide details of the provisional final settlement that the council received in the middle of December. And there's a table on page 4, table 1, that gives you an overview of the settlement that we received. And as indicated there, a slight reduction in funding from business rates, revenue support grant broadly as expected, and then the government introduced a lower tier services grant, which we received 173,000. And I think without the £173,000 grant, then we would have seen an overall reduction in funding. We've had a slight, funding is broadly as we anticipated. In terms of funding overall, as you're probably aware, New Homes Bonus has featured in the council's funding streams in previous years. It was expected that the government would review that this year, the year that's just gone, but because of COVID haven't been able to do that. So they've rolled forward the New Homes Bonus scheme into 21-22. Despite that though, because the council hasn't built enough properties or had empty properties occupied over and above the threshold set by government, then the council will receive no additional funding as a consequence of that. What it will receive is an extra £13,000 because affordable homes have been built in the borough. The report goes on page 6 just to talk about the amount of COVID-19 financial support that will be available in the next financial year, 21-22. So the council has been provisionally allocated a grant of £633,000. And at the bottom of page 6, I indicate there how I would propose to use that funding in the next financial year. Equally, the government is making available something called the Local Council Tax Support Grant, which is to recognise that there will be potentially additional numbers of people claiming council tax support, and that will lead to additional costs for the council. And in the current year, they're proposing to provide an income guarantee for both business rates and council tax. And our current estimates of that is the council is unlikely to receive anything significant from that. But of course, that calculation in actual terms won't be done until the end of the financial year, and any grant we do receive will be received in the next financial year. And finally, the government will roll forward what's referred to as the sales fees and charge scheme to the first quarter of next year to reimburse councils for their lost income from sales fees and charges. In the current year, we've had about £205,000 for that. So that's the overall position in terms of funding, broadly as expected in terms of the medium-term financial plan. The second part of the budget, the report focuses on the revised budget for the current year, and there's a table provided on page 7, table 2, which shows you the position as we are forecasting at this point in time. There is one amendment to that table. We are saying it's an underspend of £339,000 for the year. Following a reassessment of the Section 31 grant that we're likely to receive, which is a reimbursement of business rate relief money that we would get otherwise if we had business rate reliefs, has been done, and that's likely to be about £145,000 less than we were anticipating. So that underspend of 339 is reduced by 145. So underspend is just under £200,000. In terms of the various variances that make up that, there's some analysis on page 7 and page 8 that do that. Clearly, COVID-19 has had an impact, not only in additional costs for the council, but in a range of income streams. For example, we haven't been able to recover council tax and business rates and go through the process of doing that. So the core cost income budget is significantly down, £322,000. Trade waste income, because businesses have been closed, we haven't been able to collect that income, and equally planning fees are down as well. So those are examples. The biggest cost we're forecasting is an additional payment to the Pendle Leisure Trust, and we're forecasting that will be £1 million. Now, it's up to £1 million. Clearly, the trust has been closed and is able to recover funding through things like the furlough scheme. So we're placing that in the revised budget with a view to hoping that it will be less than that, and we'll keep that monitored. But any underspend, I would propose we push forward into next year, because the impact on the Leisure Trust has been significant, and the likelihood is that we will need additional funding for the trust, not only in this year, but in the next financial year too. So in terms of the COVID funding that we've had this year, on page 8 over to page 9, that sets out there the detail of that. So we've had about £31 million of business grant funding, of which we've probably paid out about £25 million so far, and we're in the process of paying out grants at the very moment to businesses that are closed. There's been a range of grants for things like containing the spread of the virus, such as self-isolation, testing and things like that. That's about £1.5 million. And then we've had funding for general budget support of about £2 million, and we've had to claim that on probably a quarterly basis from the government. And included in that is the sales fees and charges reimbursement as well. And I'll talk more about the Pendle Leisure Trust on page 9 as well. In terms of looking ahead to next year, the table on page 10 gives you the base budget for the next financial year compared to the current year. You'll see there's some significant differences there. That's largely to do with the way in which we're having to account for business rates. There's been a significant reduction in the amount of business rates we will receive this year because the government's awarded significant reliefs, and the impact of that will actually be felt in 21-22. So there's an accounting treatment, technical accounting treatment between 2 years that we're having to take account of.
In terms of the page 10, there's the outline of a strategy there for the council's balances reserves. The paper does include a full analysis of the council's balances reserves for members to look at. That's Appendix F. I think what I've said previously is the council's budget has largely been reliant on reserves to balance it from one year to the next. So we've had a mix of savings, but a lot of reserves used as well to balance the budget. We are getting to the point where the reserves, which are a finite amount of money, are starting to reduce down significantly. And so you'll see in the table at page 4, which gives you the medium-term financial plan, that the amount of money coming out of the budget strategy reserve for next year is about 650,000, but nothing thereafter. That's because the balance of that reserve should be exhausted on the basis of these numbers by 21-22 at the end of that year. There'll be about £300,000 left, but it'll be broadly exhausted. So the point where we will need to make savings in lieu of reserves, whereas previously we've had a balance of reserves and savings, is coming, and it'll be coming probably at the end of the next financial year. So I need to highlight that to members. The financial strategy is set out on page 12. We followed a strategy of trying to grow the council's tax base, whether that's through more housing or through the business rate base, but that's incredibly challenging for a variety of reasons that you're probably aware of. We have a part of the strategy is to charge more where we can do, and we bring to you every year options for charging for services. And to the extent that we can neither grow our tax base or charge for services, then the council has to reduce its cost base either by efficiencies or stopping things, and those two items form the balance of the strategy. In terms of where we're at the moment, then going back to page 11, you'll see there for the budget for 21-22, there is a savings requirement remaining for the current year of £414,000. So we're in the process at the moment of bringing forward, identifying savings to do that. We've worked with the budget working group earlier in the year on those savings that we'll be bringing to you, so you'll have an idea of that. But what I should point out on the medium-term financial plan is that if you look ahead to 22-23 and 23-24, that savings requirement rises to 1.6 million and then £1 million thereafter. So overall, there's still a requirement to save £3 million over the next 3 years. I say that in the context of not knowing what the funding for the council will be post 21-22. So at the beginning of the report, I've talked about the fact that what we've had last year and this year, a one-year funding settlement. The government has started off. The government was meant to be reviewing both the whole local government funding regime this year to feed into next year. Of course, the impact of COVID has meant that's been delayed, and now the impact of that won't be felt until 22-23. So I couldn't say with any confidence what we're going to get funding in funding terms from the government from 22-23. The report overall is a position statement, and of course what we generally do at this time is let you look at the position, and then we start to speak to you as members around the budget, and we'll bring a further report on the 11th of February or 12th of February, which will be the management team's budget proposal. Thank you.
Thanks, Dean. David, do you want to kick off?
I will, Chairman. I mean, the report makes grim reading. We've had promises from government that, we won't be out of pocket due to COVID-19, and yet we still find ourselves as an authority facing £3 million of cuts over this next 3-year period. So you really do despair. I mean, the impact on the Leisure Trust, I think it's iniquitous that the Leisure Trust, because of its relationship or independence from the council, wasn't eligible to have the loss of income grant, the 75% funding for loss of income. and that is, I mean, a significant hit to the council finances, and you know, just drives the problem still deeper. In the response, in the consultation on the provisional settlement, I think the authorities making very strong points about the particular ways in which our authority and authorities of a similar nature are disadvantaged by the way in which the government are leaving the financial matters. I mean, the new homes bonus is a good example where we're disadvantaged by that because we have a low level of house building, and the elsewhere in the country where they've got a very buoyant housing market, you know, they've been creaming it in. Well, you know, in the past, those funds would have flowed through on the basis of need rather than you've got a buoyant housing market. So, you know, we're losing out left, right and centre. I had hoped that the promised review, the fair funding review, would have led to an improvement in the council's position. We're frozen into the unfair funding that we currently have. People in Pendle are suffering as a result. The level of services for people in Pendle is suffering as a result, and it is very difficult. We have made strenuous efforts, not only during this year when obviously COVID-19 has taken over the shop, but we've made strenuous efforts over the years to try and make savings and reduce expenditure, and to some extent that has been successful and reflected in the figures that we've got here tonight. But there's a lot more that remains to be done. At this point in time, Chairman, you know, we're more or less noting the position. I do think that the savings that we're challenged with making this year, every councillor on Pendle, all the political groups and those who aren't in a political group will do their utmost to identify savings, and that we will hopefully be able to come up with a balanced budget which continues to provide the services that people want. And I'm happy to move the recommendation, Chairman. It doesn't commit us to doing anything at the moment. It's noting the position and encouraging both councillors and indeed Mr. Langton and his staff to get the thinking caps on, so that we can come forward with proposals in the meetings in February.
Okay, thanks for that, David. I'm happy to second the report and just make a few comments in addition to what yourself and Dean have said. I mean, I was just reading the letter from Sir Edward Lister back on the 16th of October, where he said that government recognised a challenging position in relation to local government funding, and that they'd confirm as soon as possible, but he'd had an assurance from the Treasury that we won't be in a position to either not balance our budget or set a legal budget next year. And then we followed it up, well, I followed it up on behalf of the council, both a letter to him and to the Member of Parliament in November, asking for some clarity and for them basically to honour the promises that they'd made to us during the negotiations back in October. But sadly, those still haven't come to fruition, and I don't hold out much hope going into February. But I think all three political groups will now not have a choice, because following the council meeting in December, we have to come up with a balanced budget between us as a council by February. And I sincerely hope that we take on board the grim picture that Dean's painted. And, you know, we all say that he paints it every year, but I think this year's the stark reality of where we are and where we're heading. And there are going to be some very difficult and tough decisions for us as councillors, but if we don't take them, you know, the likelihood is that we'll be bankrupt. And I don't think the people of Pendle will ever forgive us if we're in that position, governments end up the people then to run the council. And if people think that they're getting a level of service that they're not happy with now, you know, God forbid what kind of service that they'll then get if government come in and start running the council. You know, that's not a day that I certainly want to see. So at this moment in time, as David says, most of it's for noting, but, you know, I'd urge all political groups to really get some serious thinking caps on to see where we get to in February. Nadeem, is there anything that you need to add?
Just other than what's just been said, I think it's all agreed and recognised by all members on the council that we are and have been in some difficult financial circumstances in terms of the council. And more so this year, we've got the extra challenge of COVID, which has brought on extra pressures in itself. And I think it's incumbent on all us councillors to work together and try and move towards next month's budget in a sensible and orderly manner.
Okay, thank you. Everybody happy with noting it? Yeah. Okay, moving on to item 6, the capital programme.
Yes, Chairman. So again, this report is in 2 parts. One is a review of the current year's capital programme, and that's provided on page 2, table 1 there. There are no significant variances at this stage, other than the reference to the property investment strategy. So in 2019, we set up a property investment fund of £10 million with a view to pursuing the property investment strategy that was agreed by committee at that point in time. I suppose that what's happened is that the government has identified that some councils have equally followed that approach, but to a point where it's putting those councils at significant risk because of the level of borrowing that they're undertaking in order to invest in commercial property. And as a consequence of that, that's led to the government clamping down on councils generally borrowing funding for those commercial investments. I think equally as well, with the onset of COVID-19, the commercial property market has been significantly impacted. So it strikes me that in the midst of government guidance to avoid doing this or not to do it, and also the market being what it is, it's probably not the best thing for the council to pursue. So the proposal here is to delete both the budget and the equivalent borrowing out of the budget and keep that under as a watching brief to see whether it's something that the council wants to be involved in. I've also provided an update on Lomershire Industrial Estate in this report, but you have a separate report on that as well, so I'll not discuss that here. As I say, in overall terms, the budget is broadly balanced for this year. In terms of the position looking ahead, the capital strategy is largely unchanged, and we've sought bids from departments in the context of the resources available for capital investment next year. Just on the capital resource position for next year and subsequent years, there's a table at page 6, table 4, which sets that out. Our funding for the capital programme is largely based on either the grants we receive or capital receipts. And quite a lot of the capital programme in the current year is dependent on capital receipts, and in subsequent years will be dependent on capital receipts. Capital grants, if we get them, because we're in the bidding war like every other council, when that becomes available, generally we have to bid for that. Is the other option, but borrowing isn't really an option for us because that increases the pressure on the council's revenue budget, so we've tended not to do more borrowing because of that. Of course, capital receipts requires the council to sell assets, and one of the recommendations in the report is to bring to you a further report on the council's land and asset management strategy early in the new financial year, with a view to identifying which of the council's assets could be surplus assets, could be disposed of. I need to make the point very clearly that if the council doesn't dispose of capital receipts, the likelihood of having a sustainable capital programme in the future diminishes significantly. In table 5 on page 6, you can see there the estimate of capital receipts for the next financial year. Those are the assets that the council's already agreed to dispose of, and those are the likely receipts that we're going to get. In terms of bids for capital expenditure, those exceeded the resources that we've got by about £1 million. So we've had to do a bit of shaving of bids, and what you see on page 8, on table 8, is a draft capital programme that will probably form the basis of what we will present to you again in February, both at this meeting and then to the council. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Neil. In addition, I mean, if anybody's got any specific questions, otherwise most of these, our recommendation is to note, B is to agree the review, which I think we're all happy with, and the other two one's to note and one is to pending a further report. Are people content with the recommendations? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. The next one is item 7. I'm showing Industrial Estate Extension, Phase 1. Julie Withers.
No, it's me, Chairman.
All right.
So this provides you with an update on the extension of Lomershire Industrial Estate, which I think members are all familiar with. This is Phase 1, which is the lower part of the extension. As members probably recall, we went through a compulsory purchase process and acquired this piece of land through that means. When we did do that, we had funding in place both from the council and from Lancashire County Council to fund the scheme, about £3 million, and we'd done estimates at that point in time that meant we could do it within that cost envelope. And
you're back again.
It must be raining somewhere. So £3 million scheme plus £500,000 European funding. As you see in the report, there's been an issue with the provision of utilities on the site. When we did the original tender for the site, that came out at £250,000. Subsequent investigations on the site have meant that there is insufficient supply of electricity on site, and that in fact the site will have to be provided by electricity from a point that's 2 miles away, elsewhere in Nelson. That's one issue. The other issue is that when we did those estimates of cost, we had, of course, no idea which businesses were going to go on the site. Clearly, that's become clearer now that we know that ELE from Trawden are going to go on the site. And because of their power requirements, that's increased the cost of that supply more so than we'd anticipated when we were doing both the estimates for the scheme and the tender. So as a consequence of the requirements to spend the funding in the current year, we've had to give a waiver to standing orders in order to get that supply in and spend the funding that we've got by the end of the financial year. Had that constraint not been there, then we would ordinarily have gone back and probably looked at the tendering process again. But we are, unfortunately, in that place where we have to spend the money and we have to get on with the piece of work to do the scheme. So that's the reason for the significant overspend. The other thing that we've been doing is undertaking a negotiation on the disposal of the land, and the report provides you with details of that negotiation that's been undertaken. Because there is an overspend, and because we've done the negotiation on the disposal, we believe that the receipts from the scheme, which we didn't anticipate, could be used to fund the overspend, and we're seeking members' agreement to do that. I think that is the key issues, Chairman.
Okay. Anybody any questions? We're happy. Councillor David Wick.
I don't think happy is the word, Chairman. I think, we should have a long enough extension lead for the Lomershire extension and not have to spend a minor fortune in putting a 1.5 kVA supply into place. But we're between a rock and a hard place, or rather we're between a sort of a slippery hillside and a river bank, which is another factor. Chairman, I mean, it's fortuitous that there is sufficient value within the land to actually cover the increased costs on this. And if that wasn't the case, then some of the precious capital that Ms Langton was referring to in the last item would have had to be devoted towards this, but clearly, you know, that's going to affect the capital programme in future years anyway. Chairman, I move the report. I can't see that we can provide an industrial estate and not have the sufficient power for people to actually able to operate on it. So, you know, we need to get on with it. I move.
Thank you. Nadeem?
Yeah, just echo what Councillor Whipper said. Can I just refer to page 2 of the report in terms of number 3 to begin with? Just a question in terms of the report mentioned the ground conditions were poor. But obviously, we were all, as members, made aware of that. And it says, but more design and investigation work was carried out. It's become apparent that additional works were required. Just in terms of these additional works, what are the figures into what sort of costings are we talking for these additional works?
Dean, can you help?
No, but I'm happy to write to Councillor Ahmed separately if that will help.
Yeah, please.
I don't have them to hand. I don't think they are significant. To be honest, I've seen some figures and they don't stand out to me as being things that we would one that aren't contained within the budget, because the budget did have some contingency within to reflect this as well. But I'm happy to write to Councillor Ahmed separately about that.
If you just copy everybody in on the committee, Dean.
Yeah, I've got some further questions if that's okay. So once them works are carried out, Lancashire County Council will adopt. Am I right?
Yeah, in terms of the road, that will be the intention, is that the County Council will adopt the road and we'll continue to own the land to which the road goes.
Yeah. Secondly, just in terms of the quotes we received for the supply, the electricity supply, which originally on the water was 248,352, and the revised quotation is over £1 million. The report says some of these costs, that's 7B, that it was unforeseen. Then it mentions in C that it wasn't included in the original contract. How can I can understand some sort of change in terms of the figures, but such a huge change?
Ooh, I've got Councillor Nixon wanted to come in there, but I don't think he wanted to speak on this item. But my understanding was that when we did the tender, we weren't clear who the occupier was and what their power requirements would be. That was the issue, I think. And when we found that out, then that had a bearing on the cost.
Right. Okay.
And I think the other thing to point out, and I think it mentions in the report, is that when we were doing the estimates for all of this, we were doing it prior to owning the land, because we hadn't concluded the CPO. We were doing it to get funding out of the various people that we've got funding for. And we didn't necessarily at that time, we were able to do all of the surveys that you would ordinarily do in order to inform what costs you would need. To some extent, the costs were best guesses at that time, both attempting to do it in the knowledge of what businesses you were going to have, because one of the other issues, we anticipated when we did the scheme originally that we might have 6 or 7 different units and they would all be relatively small scale engineering or manufacturing requirements. What we've ended up with is one whole one whole unit with one occupier with a significant requirement for supply of electric. So we could never have foreseen that when we were doing this. And I say, probably had we not been in a position where we have to spend the funding or lose it, then we may have gone back and reconsidered how we deal with this. But of course, we don't have that opportunity.
Who was giving us the figures in terms of the estimates originally? Who was providing the figures to the council?
Through our engineers, our engineering team, and they will have got advice from professionals who know these things, but on the basis of thinking, well, it's 6 units, relatively low scale supply. We're not clear what exactly the supply is on Lomershey itself and whether that's adequate, because that's not necessarily information we would have had. We'd have thought it's adequate because of the nature of the industrial estate. And when further assessment is done, we're told then that in fact the supply on the estate isn't enough, and that can't be upgraded. It's got to come from 2 miles away in Nelson. So a lot of the cost is to do with actually that line through partway through Nelson into the industrial estate.
Yeah, within the infrastructure budget, there is some contingency. What sort of contingency? Can't even say the word. Did we plan for? What sort of figures have we set aside?
I couldn't tell you. Right. I think it was about £200,000, but I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, really.
Right. Okay. And just at number 15, it refers to some land which we're going to retain, which is undevelopable land. And so, what in terms of the options we've explored retaining that land, in terms of future maintenance, because obviously we'll then have liabilities to maintain that land, I presume.
Yeah. So if you look at the plan appendix,
it's a large piece of land, is that?
Yeah. It's undevelopable because that's part of the land which I think Councillor Iqbal referred to as slipping slightly, and we've explored whether we think it's developable, and we came to the conclusion with advice from consultants that it is not a developable piece of land. Otherwise, we would seek to develop it.
But then we could end up with, or we will end up with, long-term costs for the council on this side, because we're going to have to maintain all that.
Yeah, I think this is, I suppose the issue for us is when we did the CPO, we had to CPO the entirety of the land. You don't get the benefit of CPO in that bit of land that you'd like. So, it's not a piece of of that is easily disposable to any other body, because of course it's just a liability. So we will have to maintain it unless the town council wants to take it over.
In terms of the legality in the long term, just following on from that point, in terms of the future liability and maintenance, are we going to be looking at some sort of management company that will then look after itself in a way, in terms of service charges and that sort of thing? How is that going to work? Do we know?
Well, in relation to that piece of land will remain within the council's ownership, so there's no requirement to have a management company. And my understanding is we'll be looking to dispose of the land to ELE on a long leasehold, 999 years. So again, there'll be no requirement for a service charge there. And if the county council, as we expect, adopt the road, then they will maintain the road thereafter.
Yeah, but at number 16, it mentions in terms of bridleways, etc., that it's not guaranteed that Lancashire County Council will adopt them.
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose the issue is they will want them done to a standard that they feel they will take them on. But of course, they expect. I mean, we tend to look after those things anyway in Pendle. I don't necessarily think the county council do that at the moment. They pay us to do it.
Well, that negotiation's ongoing anyway, though, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, where we can offset the liabilities to somebody else, if it's their responsibility to do that, then we will seek to do that. I've no interest in keeping these things for the council where they have no benefit to us.
Sorry, I'm not being awkward here. I'm just thinking in terms of the long term. We end up with this piece of land. We've got extra costs for the council.
I think you're speaking to the converted here. I'm not interested in having pieces of land that we have to maintain. And we pursued a strategy over the last 4 or 5 years to try to get other people to take responsibility for bits of land, and this will be no different there.
But could this not be incorporated when we sell it? Could we not incorporate it within some agreements that the future owners contribute towards the maintenance of this as well? Then it's not our headache.
Yeah, I think the difficulty is for us is that this isn't a piece of land that will form part of their demise. So there's no good argument, I think, for doing that. I think, in essence, what it leads to is any capital receipt that we'd expect will be reduced as a consequence to reflect the fact there's an ongoing maintenance cost.
Right. Okay.
In the same way we've had to pay for abnormals for the site.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Jonathan, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. Before I speak on this item, I've been involved in it for about 12 months, and I wonder whether I shouldn't speak on it. But I think I could bring some clarity to the councillor's questions, perhaps, in addition to what Dean has said. would it be wrong for me to speak on this item, Chair?
Philip, can you advise?
Pardon?
I was just seeking guidance from Philip for you, Jonathan.
Well, I'm not sure what your involvement has been, but I mean, the advice has to be if you've had any involvement, then you're better off not speaking at all.
Right. Fine. It's technical. The stuff I've been dealing with is from a technical point of view, and I thought it might just help the debate.
You can share it with me after the meeting, Jonathan.
Okay. Fine.
Okay. Thank you for that, colleagues. Moving on to item 8. Jonathan, are you declaring a prejudicial interest in this one, or?
Oh, what?
Are you declaring a prejudicial interest on item 8, the joint venture procurement, or? Because if you are, then you need to leave.
No, I've got no pecuniary interest.
All right, okay.
Interest, but I work for the one of the companies involved, and I just think, in the interest of openness, that it would be inappropriate that I speak on it.
Sorry, Johnson, did you say you work or you worked?
Work. Currently work.
Well, you shouldn't speak at all. It's a prejudicial interest.
Right.
So in theory, he should leave the meeting then, shouldn't he, Philip?
Yes.
Sorry, Chairman, this isn't about the current joint venture. This is about a prospective joint venture.
I understand that.
Is that all right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, so if there's any discussion on the current one, then Jonathan's put in a position.
What? If I leave, I don't know when to come back.
I'm sure somebody will ring you.
Right. I'll go.
Right.
I'll go watch Burnley v Liverpool for a bit.
Yeah, happy to endorse that.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Is this yourself again, Dean?
It is, yes. So the council will be aware, our councillors will be aware that we've got a joint venture arrangement with Barnfield Investment Properties in the form of Pearl, and then Pearl 2, and Pearl Briarfield Mill, and now Pearl Pearl together. This relates specifically to Pearl 2. Pearl 2 was set up as after a procurement, an ODU compliant procurement process, where we went through and ultimately led to Barnfield Investment Properties being successfully appointed as our joint venture partner for a period of 10 years initially. So we did this in 2000 and, well, I can't remember, 2009 was it? Something like that. So it was 10 years originally. And then in about 5 years ago, we got agreement from the council to extend it by a further period of 5 years. We've come to the end of the legitimacy of that procurement process now. And I think, as we explained in the report, what we've attempted to do is explore what we can do in relation to extending the existing arrangement. But we've come to the conclusion, following advice, that there's no way really legitimately we can do that. So that pushes us down the route of having to re-procure the joint venture, another new joint venture arrangement, and in essence repeat the process that we did originally when Barnfield were appointed as our joint venture partner. So that's the purpose of the report, to give us agreement to proceed on that basis. The report sets out the way forward at page 4, and we'd like the committee's agreement to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. David?
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I mean, as someone going back many years involved with setting up the first joint venture and obviously subsequent ones, I mean, these have been remarkably successful for Pendle, the Pendle area, because of the regeneration that has been able to be carried out as a consequence of the activities. I think, Chairman, it obviously it is a requirement, and it's right and proper that we should go through a further procurement exercise and be satisfied that we're getting best value in terms of the arrangements that we've got, and I think that subsequently stands us in good stead when we get the inevitable criticism that sort of we're all hand in glove and all that sort of stuff, which I hasten to to add is not the case. So, Chairman, I think the right approach is outlined in the report that we've got. Unfortunately, it will cost money because inevitably, you need to shell out for the people, the experts, the consultants who have got all the knowledge and the answers. So we've been here before. We need to do it, and I think that given the potential for further regeneration in the future, it's something that we have to do. Without having the Pearl group of companies, there is so much dereliction, so much development, job creation that wouldn't have happened, and I can't see that we would want to get back to the sort of situation where the council is unable, through a joint venture, to get that work done in the future. So I would move the report and the recommendations within it.
Okay, I'll second those. Nadine?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Councillor Whipper said in terms of the success of the joint venture companies we've had. I think many of the projects we've undertaken across Pendle, there's no way us as Pendle Council on our own would have been able to carry them out. We've had millions of pounds of investment across the borough. It has been a success. With the success has come some criticism, as we've all acknowledged, and this is the right thing to do in terms of going forward for the sake of openness and transparency. So I think, yes, it will cost some money, but I think the long-term gains outweigh the short-term costs. So fully behind this.
Zafar?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Just thinking out loud, is there a possibility of sharing some figures in terms of what these returns look like, or what they've looked like, rather?
Sorry, what do you mean, what they've looked like?
Well,
in terms of what Pearl's yielded?
That's correct.
Yeah, I mean, Dean can share that. It's previously been shared, I remember, at a full council meeting, in terms of for every pound that we've put in, what we've got out of Pearl. So Dean can share that with yourself, Councillor Ali.
Okay.
Dean's happy to, yeah. Thank you. Fine. Everybody happy? Thanks. Somebody just put a message on for Jonathan to return. Okay, and if you can do the honours.
Yes, we'll ring you.
Thank you. Moving on to the local plan. Neil?
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, this was deferred because members wanted some further information on it, which we've brought back. So there's quite an extensive evidence base that's been produced, looking at the essay documents. Some of them are 200-300 pages long. So hopefully people will have a full indication now of how the policies have been arrived at, because they are arrived at following an evidential process. So, Chairman, I won't go into the plan in any detail, because we could, when we have examinations in public to dissect a plan, they take 2 or 3 weeks. So I won't go into that in any great detail. But, Chairman, just concentrate on this is a public consultation proposal. We need to test our plans and the evidence, and whether our plans are sound, and you'll get different views from different perspectives, from public sector bodies, town councils, etc., through to the development industry, through to members of the public. And it's only really when we get those that we can test whether the veracity of our policies and the evidence base are sound enough for us to go forward. But the premise really of these are that we re-looked at the housing needs using the government standard methodology as the starting point, although I know that is there's potential changes to that, and added our economic aspirations, which has already been approved at the core strategy stage. We've redone the viability work to help us sift our sites. We've looked at every site we've had and gone through a sifting process through the sustainability appraisal, adding in the layers of flooding, etc. on top of that, and come up with a set of proposals for providing the additional housing that is the residual, which is, just to recap, there's a residual housing need of 783 units when we use the methodology and the outputs from the housing needs assessment. Chairman, there's a set of plans there about the sites which we're proposing. There are some sites which are reserve sites, which we were asked to put in by the planning inspector, and it's also part of Live One, the policy that we've already got. So, Chairman, they've been assessed, and we put some of those forward. Chairman, really is for committee to hopefully endorse the plan and the evidence base to go forward for public consultation.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Just before I open it up, just in terms of the public consultation, obviously in light of where we are with the pandemic, how are we going to do that? I know normally we do like roadshows, but I assume we're not going to do those.
Chairman, we won't be able to do that. We've got a huge email list, and to be honest, it will be online publicity and emailing them. If people want to have discussions with us, we can arrange Teams discussions. But as you say, we can't go to libraries and the like that we would normally do to publicise this. Chairman, a lot of the work is done prior to this in terms of discussions with various bodies. So I'm not expecting a great deal to come back from the likes of Lancashire County Council and neighbouring councils, because we're in constant contact with those. But for members of the public, yes, they're not going to get the library visits, etc. And indeed, we've been out to schools, etc. before in plan preparation. So yes, that's going to be quite a challenge for us.
Okay, thanks for that, Neil. Anybody, any questions of Neil? Sarah?
Thank you for this, Neil. There's obviously a great deal to digest and read, and I know what a terrific amount of work the team has put in. Talking about the public consultation, our Zoom calls were really well subscribed by Coners. We reached out to people that are not known to us. We don't know them, and it worked that we put them into themes. So if you could break down the plan, which is enormous, into themes for the public consultation, and then promote those Zoom call or Teams calls, because it's Pendle. Cone Town Council is a Zoom council, but you could promote those, and I feel you would get engagement. And I have to say that now we are reviewing all the responses from all people that replied to our consultation, members of the public, etc. And there are really interesting things, because with the best will in the world, if you're in a working group, you can't know everything. And there are things that we need to improve, things that we need to add. There were historic buildings, there were a new green space that we'd overlooked. I think it really is worthwhile engaging with the public. It is a difficult time. People do actually really appreciate it, I find. And I think it would show that Pendle Council really cares what people think if we make that effort.
Okay, thanks for that, Sarah. David?
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I was the person that proposed that we deferred this, because I thought the tone from the top, the expectations of government and the policies and the processes that this local plan has to be built upon were too uncertain, that we were building on shifting ground again. And there's reference in the report on page 4 and over onto page 5 there about those uncertainties. And I was hoping that some of those uncertainties would be resolved by the time that we considered the draft plan as set out in this report in all its voluminous appendices. But you know, there hasn't been any resolution in terms of COVID-19. You know, no one really knows what the economic impact is going to be. On the planning white paper, we know there's been scores of thousands of comments on the planning white paper. You know, what account will be taken of those, if any, and you know, how long will it be before the sausage machine spits something out at the end of that? And then again, on the evidence base, we know that there's going to be an impact in terms of town centres retail, but we don't know what it is. So I, for one, Chairman, I'm not going to vote for going out to consultation on this basis. I think it's far too uncertain, and you know, there is stuff in here that, if circumstances different, will be changed. And I just think that we're going to set hares running which need not necessarily start running.
Okay, Neil, you wanted to come back in?
Yes, Chairman. Just briefly, we were considering that, and obviously government could give advice on how council should deal with the uncertainties in the short term. But Chairman, the only thing that I've come across is the Housing Minister Chris Pincher wrote to all councils. You may have seen the letters between. Yeah, I can certainly share that if people wish to. And basically said just local authorities, it's one to every council, just get on with doing your local plans. There was nothing in the letter that said you slow down or you change or we're going to issue different advice on the impacts of COVID, or the planning policy nationally is going to change or alter through the impacts of COVID. So I understand, and obviously we want to look and deal with COVID, but there's no policy change from government that I'm aware of, and the advice is clear from the minister who wrote to us: is proceed with what you're doing as quickly as you possibly can.
Okay, thanks, Neil. I mean, clearly we're not going to get a unanimity on this, so for the purposes of the vote, I'll move the recommendations. Is there somebody to second, and then we can go to the vote?
Second that, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So, okay, guys, if you're in favour, 4. If you're against. If you want to abstain, abstain. Councillor Nadeem Ahmed.
Abstain.
Councillor David Clegg.
Against.
Councillor Sarah Coburn-Price.
4.
Councillor Tommy Cooney.
4.
Councillor Mike Goldthorpe. Mike, is he frozen? Mike, can you hear me? Mike? I'll come back to you, Mike. I think you're having some technical issues. No. I'll come back to you, Mike, at the end, don't worry. Councillor Mohammed Iqbal, 4. Councillor Yasser Iqbal. 4. Councillor Ashad Mahmood.
4.
Councillor Brian Newman.
Against.
Councillor Jonathan Nixon.
4.
Councillor David Whip.
Against, and can my vote be recorded in the minutes, please?
Okay. Councillor Zafar Ali.
4.
Councillor Neil McGowan.
4.
Mike Goldthorpe, are you back with us? Mike, can you hear me? No, I think Mike's struggling. James, so I get that 8 in favour, 3 against and 1 abstention.
That's right, Chairman.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman.
Item 10. Oh, sorry, Neil. Item 10, the original item 10 was withdrawn, and I'm going to replace that item 10 with the urgent item, which is around internal audit, which was circulated by Jane. Dean, are you with us? Dean, yes.
Yes, sorry, Chairman. So as this committee probably may recall, Council has agreed that the internal audit service should be put out to tender. What you have is the outcome of the tender process, which has been undertaken over the last few months. And through an evaluation, it's recommended that the preferred supplier is MIAM as the internal audit agency. I say it's the preferred supplier. We have to go through a 10-day standstill period after the decision this evening before we can then conclude the contractual arrangements with them.
Okay. David?
Move the proposal, Chairman.
Okay. Happy to second that. Everybody okay with that? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, these are from area committee. So item 11A is a public toilet provision in Nelson. I mean, as a Nelson councillor, there are other colleagues from Nelson. The view of the area committee was quite strong in terms of trying to reopen the public toilets. But as was discussed at the area committee, that the council doesn't have any money as such in order to run the toilets. I mean, it says to look at them in terms of town deal funding. What I'm going to suggest is that if officers can write to the current owner of the toilets and ascertain what is their intention, and then if that can be reported back to Nelson Area Committee, please. And then if need be, Nelson Area Committee can have a discussion with the Town Council and see where we go with this one.
Chairman, by way. Yeah, in fact, we've already done that and we are in negotiations to acquire the toilets. So once if we get to a successful conclusion, then we will report that to members.
Okay, fine. And then we can have a discussion with the Town Council at the same time.
Yeah.
We've indicated to take on the revenue spending. Everybody okay with that?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Next one is the rollout of fibre to the property broadband in West Craven. David?
Thank you, Chairman. Yourself, myself and Mr Langton had a presentation from Openreach a few months ago now, where they outlined that Bonoldswick Exchange had been selected by the strategic group at Openreach for the rollout of fibre to the property, which provides broadband speed equivalent to what people in the urban areas currently get through Virgin. And that programme is well on the way, and in fact I can share this image which I took today. I'm sorry if it's a bit blurry, but this is part of the army of Openreach engineers who were busy blowing fibre through ducts and running it up poles, ready so that it can be extended into people's houses. And the sorry, I'm just trying to switch this off now. It's sort of gone haywire. Where are we? Here we are. So that work is underway, and simultaneously, Openreach are running through the spine, the big lump of fibre from the Nelson Exchange through to the Bonoldswick Exchange. Now, at the meeting we did ask Openreach about exchanges such as Earby and the other rural parts of Pendle, because outside the main conurbations of Nelson and Colne, and I'm assuming that Bryfield has the fibre to the premises. Outside that conurbation, communities do not have that very fast internet speeds, which I think are demanded more and more nowadays. So, we're looking at Lancashire Bridge, looking at Trawden, Folridge, Earby, Kelbrook at my end of the borough, and there'll be other parts of the borough that are affected too. Now, we're very fortunate that Bonalswick and Salterford are getting this, and it will be available to people in that's in the Bonalswick Exchange area as from March. So my thoughts are really with all the areas that aren't getting it, and the necessity for pressing Openreach and their decision-making bodies to include these other exchanges and other areas within subsequent rollouts of this fibre to the property. It's absolutely critical for people working at home, for businesses that are dependent on high-speed communications. And judging by the way that Mr. Langton's signal was dropping out earlier on, perhaps it's something that Pendle Council need to invest in too. However, the key thing is, can we put pressure on BT on the Openreach? Sorry, can we ensure that the rollout for the rest of Pendle is as speedy as possible? And I'd like to propose that we met representations to the appropriate bodies to ensure that happens just as soon as ever we can.
I'm happy to second that, but I think rather than just making representations, I mean, they approached us, if you remember, to give us details in terms of the Bonalswick rollout, and so it's clearly a positive relationship, and we said that we'd work with them in a positive manner. I think rather than simply making representations for potentially a letter to come back, say, well, yeah, we've considered it, no thanks. If Dean still has the contacts of the guys, I mean, if not, I have the one that's the local one. Ask them to set up a meeting with myself, yourself, David, Councillor David Whip, and say any West Craven, any Earby or any rural park councillors who want to partake in that meeting. We can have that virtual face-to-face discussion with them, and then it's a bit more difficult for them to say no without any justification. So I'll take it one step further and ask that we try and set up a meeting as quickly as possible, if you're happy with that.
I am, Chairman. I mean, I've had a continuing dialogue with WACAS, who set up the previous meeting, and I've been working with him to resolve just an odd issue that we've had in terms of getting the spine through, which fortunately Lancashire County Council came good with that difficulty, which I'll say no more about, but it was a refreshing change, let me put it that way. But WACAS isn't the person, it's the strategic committee of Openreach who we need to get through to. So I think WACAS might be able to advise us who it is or where we need to go, but it isn't WACAS.
I'm sure as a Pendle lad, he'll guide us in a positive manner anyway. Okay.
Yeah.
Brian.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just come in on this one, please?
Of course you can.
Right. Well, I'm just a bit puzzled. It's all about Bonalswick, Colne, various. No, I just hope that we in Pendleside are going to get the same thing as everybody else, because we have an awful lot of people that work from home, obviously like everyone else, and this must be incorporated with Pendleside, which is Fens, Higham, Newchurch, etc. Could we push for Pendleside as well, please?
We will, Brian, don't you worry. That's why I'm rallying the troops, and you'll be at the front of the queue.
At the front? Can I quote you on that, sir? Thank you.
Yeah, so long, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, next I've got Sarah.
Just very briefly, I'd be very grateful if I could be invited to the meeting, given that Bullsworth and Eastern Cone is a tragic place to be broadband-wise.
Okay, point noted. Okay, colleagues, thank you for that. The next one is a capital programme for the replacement basket swing from Corn. Councillor David Wick.
Thank you, Chairman. I've had some dialogue with colleagues in Colne, and I think that this issue transcends a single basket swing. I think it would be relatively easy to resolve a single basket swing, but the problem is rooted in the Millennium Green, that charity, its ownership of the land, and the interrelationship between the town council, who at one point would have been quite happy to take on the ownership and the responsibility for the play area, but that is not possible. And when and Councillor Clegg's here, and he can tell you more about this than I, but when the play areas were transferred over, this wasn't included, and the responsibility remained with the existing providers. My suggestion, Chairman, is I will volunteer to chair a meeting of all the relevant parties, which will include Pendle Council, the Millennium Green trustees, and the Town Council, to try and find a way through so that we can actually get a resolution of the wider issue in terms of the future ownership and responsibility for looking after the land, and just for the time being set to one side the question of a £1,200 basket swing, so that we might get a hope of resolving the whole kit and caboodle. So that's my offer, Chairman, and
I'm happy to take you up on your offer.
Well, I thought you might be. I am just wondering, but you know, there you go.
Sarah, then I've got David Clegg.
I'm happy to go after Councillor Clegg.
Okay, Councillor Clegg.
I thought Sarah might say that. Well, this is an ongoing saga, and it's been going on, well, not weeks, not months, but it's a couple of years it's been going on. And I think Philip knows as well as any of us, because he's been involved in it in one form or another, trying to help us sort it out. David is right in what he said. It didn't transfer. It never did transfer to Colne Town Council. All the other play areas did, but this one didn't. And what we did say was that we would take on any of the play areas that Pendle owned in Colne, providing the land, the ownership of the land, was transferred to the Town Council. And they found themselves in a position where they couldn't transfer this piece of land because of ownership, and it had been done on a long lease, I believe, to or the ownership had been changed at Millennium Green, but Millennium Green were involved in it. And there's a problem with the Charity Commission in the Millennium Green being allowed to transfer this piece of land. So for about a year, this went on, and we agreed we would, as the Town Council, we would agree that we would not take on the play area as such until such time as they could transfer it, but we would do the cleaning of it, etc., which we did. I think Sarah's nodding her head that I'm right up to now. And then we got into a situation where it had gone on about 18 months. It was getting nowhere nearer being sorted out. So we said to the Millennium Green, if they didn't sort something out, we would stop cleaning it and doing various things on there. And we asked them if they would take some measures into having the ownership made into a position where it could be transferred to the town council. First of all, they said they would, then they said they wouldn't, and then they said they would, and this is going on, and it goes on for a year. At the end, we said to them, what steps have you taken to do it? Have you applied to the Charity Commission, etc., so that to get permission to transfer this land? And they said, no, we haven't. And I said, do you really want to transfer the land to the town council so we'll take on the play area? And they said, no, we don't want to transfer it, we want to keep it, which was fair enough, and they put that in writing. So at that time we were renewing the maintenance agreement for all our other play areas, which we have done, and we've taken out on a 5-year contract. Also at that time we spent about £160,000 in total on refurbishing various play areas within Colne that we do have ownership of. And this play, the Millennium Green play area, does need a lot of work doing on it, and as a consequence has fallen behind. Now, I can appreciate David's idea with this of trying to help negotiate a way forward to put the ownership of this play area into the ownership of Colne Town Council, so they will take it on and it takes the problem away from Pendle. But I'm afraid I don't think you will get the town council to agree to that now, because they've been messed about for 2 years. We've put £160,000 worth of capital into refurbishing the play areas and the work's just been finished. And we've taken a 5-year contract out on the maintenance. And I don't think they're going to undo and unstitch all that unless that play area is brought up by Pendle Council to a standard of our others. And I don't think I've a lot else I can say on it.
Well, Chairman, it might be testing the skills of my diplomacy, but I'm more than happy to be the Henry Kissinger in this case. And I do think that, you know, a resolution needs to be sought, because it's going to be a problem forever and a day unless we found a way forward. And there are always ways and means.
Right. And this council has every confidence in your ability to act like Henry Kissinger, David. Sarah.
You heard the ire of Councillor Clegg there, and he actually underestimated the time, because that's just been his involvement. When I was chairman of Colne Town Council, I put in 2 years with the Millennium Green Trust, and I didn't know that they didn't want to transfer the land. I just thought they weren't very good with paperwork. So I didn't know that they absolutely didn't want to transfer it. I think, okay, we all know there's a situation. We have all genuinely tried our best. It would be anomalous for Colne Town Council to pay for a playground that it doesn't own. That's just wrong. But I think we should set that to one side and look at what's before us tonight, with the understanding that we do have to grasp the nettle to try and find a way forward, if at all we can. I mean, I might point out that the Millennium Green Trust could raise money themselves. They could, when COVID restrictions are lifted, have events on the Millennium Green, or, you know, do fundraising. That there are things that could be done. They could apply for grants. So just looking at this capital bid, it came to Colne Area Committee, and I have to say, I thought it was anomalous at the time. We have these things all the time. For example, just recently, there's been a bid at Ball Grove to provide a stable surface in front of the Lakeside Cafe. And we didn't even bring it to Colne Area Committee. The Bullsworth councillors, Margaret and Paul Foxley and myself, just paid the requisite money, which was more than this. So the waterside councillors, similarly, just the same. When you've got a problem in your park, you pay for it in your ward. The waterside councillors, they have the money in their capital funds. I believe they should share it between three of them. It's not so much money each, and I don't think that it should come to this committee for Pendle Council to pay for it out of its central pot. That's just my view.
Okay, well, I think David's offer of trying to resolve the bigger issues is one. I mean, I think for the purposes of tonight, we're noting the bid, just parking it to one side. But once David has brought a resolution to this, hopefully we'll report back to the committee that he's sorted it all, and he has the full backing of Pendle Council behind him.
Yeah. So, Chairman, the meeting would be between Pendle councillors, Pendle Council, the ward councillors, the Millennium Green people, and representatives of Colne Town Council, and let's see if we can find a way forward.
Okay, very good, thank you. And then the last item is one from West Craven about speeding vehicles.
Chairman, I mean, this is bizarre because there have been innumerable instances, and I'm sure it's not just West Craven, but across Pendle, where there are concerns about road safety. The area committee resolves that these issues are taken up with the county council, and specifically the West Craven area committee has referred things to the traffic liaison meeting, which is a joint Pendle Council, Lancashire Council meeting where such issues should be discussed. And we've now got the absurd situation where Sandra Farnell, who one of our representatives on that committee, that meeting, takes forward these resolutions from the area committees and is told that they cannot be discussed at the traffic liaison meeting. The county council doesn't have people to talk about speeding vehicles and road safety, and that she has to fill in a form on a Lancashire Road Safety Partnership website. And I've raised this at the county council, and several other indignant county councillors have said, yeah, this is ridiculous, that we've got to fill a form in on a Lancashire Road Safety Partnership website, and any forms that are filled in, are spirited away to some back room and somebody looks at it, and if they decide they're not going to do aught about it, you can't discuss it again for an innumerable period of time afterwards. So there is considerable frustration across the board in West Craven. I'm sure that this is shared by colleagues in other parts of Pendle. We want to be able to have a sensible discussion with the county council about road safety issues, about suggestions about speed in traffic and what measures could be taken to deal with them. And to be fobbed off with or report it to a website is absolutely absurd. So I'd like to propose that we do take this up with the county council. We've still got a meeting outstanding with the portfolio holder for highways, and I would suggest that we add it to the agenda for that meeting and bring that on as soon as we possibly can.
Okay, yeah, happy to. I'll follow that up in writing with Keith Hidden and ask for that meeting to be arranged as quickly as possible and add this to the item on that particular agenda. Sarah, then Nadine.
I have battled with this website immensely. Quite often you find some of the worst hotspots are just dismissed with, we have looked at this in the last 2 years and we won't look at it again. And it forces you into a kind of form straitjacket. What days does this happen? Well, I can tell you that in my ward, we're talking Laneshire Bridge, Trawden and parts of Eastern Colne, the times when we get the really insane speeding, it's when it's sunny. Now, you can't put that on a form. You can't put, when the weather's glorious, people floor the accelerator. And similarly, very late at night. Now, they have sent in Trawden and in various places those speed vans to look at it at sort of 3:15, sort of school picking up time. The mad speeding doesn't happen then. Then they will put on their website, we have looked at this and we find it fine. Perhaps there could be community action, and we'll put up a little correct sign on your road, which inevitably the wind will spin round the wrong way and it will be pointless. So I would be very keen to try, if at all possible, to add the voice from Colne and Colne Area Committee and Colne Safety Partnership, where this has come up innumerable times.
Well, before I bring Nadeem in, once I get a date, what I may do is try and extend the invitation to the chairs of the area committees. Clearly David doubles up anyway, and see whether then each area committee's councillors can feed into their chairman specific issues that they want to raise. But I need to get a date out to him first. Nadeem?
Yeah, I also share the frustration in terms of when issues are reported to Lancashire County Council in terms of road safety, which are really important issues for us as councillors and for our residents. Yet when these issues are reported, I've personally found the level of bureaucracy is unbelievable, and the hoops you have to go through, and then at the end of it, you don't even get a satisfactory answer, and it is unacceptable. And I think I'm fully behind putting any extra pressure on Lancashire County Council to try and take appropriate action to prevent serious accidents.
Okay, thanks. Final word to David Clegg. Or I've got Brian. I'll give so David Clegg, and then the final word to Brian Newman.
Thank you, Chairman. I've no doubt most of us are aware that once again last night they had to close Burnley Road, and it was a shocking night last night because there were rain coming down, there was snow coming down, there were all sorts coming down, and once again Burnley Road in Colne had to be closed because another car ended up on its roof. And it was closed for about, I do believe it was closed for about 6 hours in total. That's how serious it was. And it's not just a problem in odd places, it's a problem throughout the borough. And these vehicles, they're tuned up to such an extent and have all sorts of fancy gadgets on them that you can be on road and you can hear them 5 minutes before they get to where you are. It's just getting ridiculous, and someone's going to have to do something about it, because I know some people have been injured badly and one or two have been killed with it. But if we're not careful, there's going to be a lot more people potentially that could be killed with it, and something has got to be done.
I agree with that entirely. Brian, final word to you, my friend. Well, you've muted yourself.
No, right, we're on. Just like to say, could the parish councils be involved in this? Because we get it every meeting that we have about the speeding in country lanes and obviously the Paddy and bypass, the 6068. Could we be informed of what goes on?
I think that's my purpose of involving the area committee chairs, Brian, because if I say to the county council that the parish councils are also going to come, then I've no chance of getting a time out of him, because the county hierarchy don't like meetings with more than one person usually.
No.
So, but the parish councils, wherever they are, can feed through via the area committee chairman, if that's okay.
That's fine. Thanks very much for that.
Thank you. I said Brian would have the last word, but Jonathan, go on.
My view is, if you want to get anywhere, Lancashire County Council is not the answer, full stop. And that's not just to do with speeding, it's to do with road repairs, road gullies. But in terms of tackling speeding cars, Lancashire County Council is not the way forward. I wonder whether there's any other way we can do it, and I turn to the more experienced councillors who may know.
I think just very quickly, Jonathan, I don't think there is, because the county council are the highway authority, and it's their duty. The fact that they don't do what we want them to do, and it's not just Pendle, it's across the county. It is disappointing, but I think that is the avenue that we have to explore and push. And I'm sure when Nadeem invites Jeff Driver for his virtual cup of tea this month, he'll raise that with him again.
I'm sure he will.
Yeah, I'm sure he will.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for that.
Right. Okay, colleagues, can I thank you all for your indulgence this evening, and wish you all, as usual, a virtual safe journey home. Thank you. Bye-bye.